So what I'll talk about is resilience. Let me open up the PowerPoint, and it'll take about 10 minutes, and then Officer Drobic will give his presentation. Okay. Can people see that? Hello?
I just see your face, Nils. I don't see your PowerPoint yet.
Okay, let me see this. That's it, right?
There you go. Now we're in.
You think I would know how to do this by now? Okay. Good. All right. So this is three tips that you can do for your own resilience. So things that you can do before any kind of trauma to help you be more resilient if a trauma comes, or to be resilient after a trauma, or like many police have, series of traumas over and over again. And here are the three strategies. I'll repeat them throughout this talk. And this is based on actually a researcher in a TED Talk that I found recently. So the three strategies for you to try are: one, know that shit happens. So bad things happen. We have to accept that. Two, place your attention intentionally and productively. So where you put your mind and your thoughts, you have say over that. You have free will. You can decide what to think of and what not to think of to a certain degree. And ask yourself during any action, especially after a trauma, is this helping or hurting? Very simple question, worth asking. It's also good after grief, especially. Okay, shit happens. So that's the first one. It's not number one. These aren't ranked. Shit happens, accept it and be prepared. So I'm not going to read this whole poem, but it's a famous poem by a guy named Longfellow. But the famous line is, into each life some rain must fall. We all must be prepared for bad things. It's just inevitable that bad things are going to happen in life. It's always going to rain, and into everybody's life some rain must fall. So how do you prepare for that? So there's a lot of different preparations. So imagining or facing your fears, that's one of the ways we treat PTSD. So you, with a therapist generally, you slowly expose yourself to the thoughts and ideas of that trauma, and you kind of talk it out and you approach it, but you don't get overwhelmed by it. And then you step back and you talk about it and you sort of learn to relax a little, and then you approach it and you step back. And also this can be if you have a fear of public speaking, give a little talk to your family and then give a talk to a bigger group and a bigger group. That's how you prepare for that one time where you have to give a public speech or anything along those lines. So Michael Phelps. So Michael Phelps is obviously I think, the most decorated Olympian. And so he's always on the cutting edge of what's best for training. And all the vogue was imagery, positive imagery. Imagine yourself running the race. Imagine hitting that perfect turn at the right time and going back and forth, and just imagining it working out and winning. And that does help. But he on his own discovered it was getting boring to do that. So he decided to start imagining things going wrong. And he imagined, his goggles getting flooded with water. He imagined someone coming into his lane. He imagined all these bad things and prepared for them and thought about them. And it actually happened in the Olympics in London. His goggles did fill with water, which is an unusual event, but it happened. But he knew exactly what to do. He had imagined this scenario, and he was ready. And he counted his strokes, and he hit the wall, and he won. And then Samurai Wars and Zombie Apocalypse. I'll explain that now. So this woman on the bottom here was part of this famous, now popular podcast called Dirty John, and I recommend it to anyone. She's this little woman who was attacked by a large man, and there's a whole series around it, but she was able to fend him off and actually kill him. And they had a struggle with a knife, and she stabbed him in the eye and killed him. And people asked her, like, how are you able to do that? Are you a karate expert? And she said, no, I would watch zombie movies and imagine what I would do if I were ever attacked. So she had already imagined that scenario. And had she not, she probably wouldn't have had that thought to kill that person. And then samurai warriors actually spend a lot of their time thinking about meditating on their own deaths. So they don't constantly think how they're going to win every battle. They imagine losing battles and being killed. And they think of all the different ways in which that can happen. And a lot of Eastern meditations do have these meditations on their own death. And that helps you prepare for the inevitable that we will all meet. And it actually helps people feel better. I know it's a strange thing, but it works. And then just connect to people. Another one, the Stoics from 2,000 years ago, roughly 1,500 years ago, the philosophy was every now and then think of bad things happening. Think of like if you're in a stupid fight with your spouse or something about taking out the garbage or whatever it is, it is good at some point to reflect during the day, what would my life be if she were gone, or if my kids were gone, or my parents were gone? And just it has to be intentional. It's not like you want to dwell on it, it's popping into your head and vexing you. Take a moment to think how awful it would be if they were gone. Imagine it, imagine your feeling. The next time you see that person, you're going to treat them differently. You're going to have a connection to them. So always connect with people. Connecting with people is probably the number one. If I had to rank recommendations for resilience, that's number one. The things you take for granted, someone else is praying for. Know your limits and what you control. This is much easier said than done. So you just have to practice it. Know what you can control and know what you can't control. And this says just chuck it in the fuck it bucket and move on. So know what you have to just get rid of. Know what you just gotta fuck it. Yes, not fuck. Attention. So the next one is place attention intentionally and productively. So the first one was know that shit happens and accept it. Okay, putting attention in the right places. So negative emotions are easy to find. So hunt for the good stuff, especially when things are going really shitty. Hunt for the good stuff. Something is going well in your life. And this slide on the right is from the U.S., I think, Army, and they do resilience and training. And this phrase came from the Army themselves. They say, hunt for the good stuff. If everything's looking crappy, don't just focus on the crappy stuff. Another good example is there was a woman who lost 3 children within a year and a half, all her children essentially. And the interviewer asked her, how did you get through that? And she said, at first I just was in a dark room and it was just completely dark and I cursed the darkness. And then there was a sliver of light, but I stayed in the darkness and just cursed the darkness. And then eventually she realized it's better to go over to the light and try to expand the light outwards. And that always stuck with me. So connect with people first. That's where you should put your attention. If you're on the couch and someone says, help me out, help them out. People first. And meditation works because that's the practice of putting attention where you want it. So connecting with people, that's always the right thing. Control what you can, rework the story and face your fears. These are the things we talked about earlier. And then forgiveness. Put your attention towards forgiveness as opposed to retribution. So there's a time and place for retribution, but forgiveness is much more important. Okay, so know that shit happens. Place attention intentionally and productively. And then the last one actually can be the most powerful and one of the easiest to remember, actually. So whenever you're in a situation that's stressful, or you're mourning, or you're grieving, or you're reliving an event, ask yourself during any action, is this helping or hurting? Is it helping to stay on the couch and dwell about the past? Is it helping to chase this line of thinking and continue to go down that path? Because some people feel like they need to be punished, so they'll keep thinking about it and thinking about it. Ask yourself, is it helpful or hurting? It's a good practice at all times, but especially after grief or trauma, but grief. So if you're grieving, grief is a very important thing to go through, and we all have to do it in our own ways. Like my grandfather says, you can't tell someone who to love or how to grieve. But I'm giving you one little pointer about how to grieve, and that's ask yourself, is this helping or hurting? Is it helping to look at these old photos of your departed loved one? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you have to ask yourself that. Again, forgiveness, self-compassion, and again, always put people first. The connections with other people, and it doesn't have to be you need 1 million friends, but If you have 5 close people in your life, you're better off than a lot of people in this world. And nurture those relationships, because that's sort of depositing in the bank of resilience. Okay, live good, live better. Is this helping or hurting? The meaning of good and bad, of better or worse, is simply helping or hurting. So that means that, are you helping yourself? You're doing good. If you're hurting yourself, you're doing bad. So remember to ask, always ask, is this helping me or hurting me? Am I making a good choice or a bad choice? You have to remember to ask, and that's where mindfulness can come in. So attention and intention, know that shit happens. Place attention intentionally and productively, and ask yourself during any action, is this helping or hurting? And that's it. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over back to, unless people have questions, I'll turn it back over to Jeff, and he'll introduce our speaker.